A local church hosts its diversity team's first program of 2026, calling it Loving Our Neighbors in Minneapolis, how everyone can be part of the movement to support immigrants. The program featured speaker Rev. Violet Jonaker, who shared her firsthand experiences as part of the protests in Minneapolis. Last month, Jonaker responded to a call for clergy support during the recent surge of activity by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Minnesota. While talking about her experiences, she offered practical ways individuals and congregations can support immigrant communities.
The infrastructure simply does not exist for ICE to do the work that it's doing without the cooperation of private companies. So we're seeing people protesting the hotels where these agents are staying. We're seeing people protesting Enterprise Rent-A-Car where the ICE is renting these vehicles from. It's completely different than any other normal law enforcement or military operation in the United States.